Hi there, I'm Carrie from Carrie Dubber Therapy, and I'm reviewing and reflecting on Brené Brown's book Braving the Wilderness, and I'm up to chapter 5. So check out some of the other chapters that I've reviewed already. It's a very interesting read, and I'm really enjoying the process of understanding what she's meaning. And there's very practical steps to endeavor to be better, to bravely move into the wilderness, being your own person, belonging to yourself and standing up and standing for yourself. So, in this chapter, which is called Speak Truth to Bullshit, Be Civil, what she's looking at is, well, what does she mean by bullshit? And she's using the work that's been done by somebody else, Harry Frankfurt, professor in Yale, and he did a whole book on bullshit. And the definition that Brené Brown introduces to us is that we can lie to ourselves sometimes, but bullshit is something slightly different. And what she means by that, so lying, she says, is a defiance of the truth. So it's like you're arguing against what you believe to be the truth. And you might know the truth, but then you find yourself in a position where you're defying that truth and lying, therefore, you know you're lying. But bullshitting is something different. It's like a dismissal of the truth altogether. I do not want that truth. And so I'm going to speak something else as though that's true. And that's what she means by that. And the work by Harry Frankfurt develops the idea of how we get caught up in bullshit, how we speak it ourselves and how we hear it but don't call it out as well. And I guess there's elements of fear that we know that if we don't feel that we are able to speak up, the fear of being rejected, the fear of being dismissed, the fear of being rejected from the group itself might be enough to not speak up to what you know not to be true. But there's also this stronger element of denying the truth because it feels too hard to get to. And that as a society, she suggests, is happening, that it's so many people speak as though it's the truth and it feels too difficult to stand up. Everyone is saying something else and it feels too hard to go against that, even though you know it's not true, or maybe you think it might not be true, but it's just, well, this is how it is. We will never get to the truth. So therefore, why bother? We'll just accept what somebody says. And what's happening in society, what she talks about in previous chapters, is this sorting. So this real dichotomy. So this distancing, this bunkering down into a camp of this is what these people are saying and I'm with them, because it feels easier to say I'm with them than to stand on my own in the wilderness. And she says that this is happening in the way that people talk about things. Either you're with me or you're against me. So there's this real line, this like party line, either you're with me or you're not, and then you're against me, rather than the nuance, the reality, which is there's lots of grey areas. Well, I might not be with you, but I'm not necessarily against you. I just have a different opinion about it. I have a different, slightly different viewpoint about what that is or what that means for me. But that feels too difficult, and people feel very angry and exposed and uncomfortable with that difference and do not want you to have that because then it's testing their own beliefs. So therefore they're trying to pull you in or reject you altogether. So she brings up examples of how that comes about in her own life, like with the gun lobby and aspects like that. But it's useful for us to think about that in our own lives and really try to understand how we can get caught up in other people's wish for us to be on one side or another when really it's not quite like that. Of this chapter is about how we can talk to what we are disagreeing with or have a different opinion about or have a viewpoint that we are not happy with how things are. and speaking about these things with civility. And what she notices when we get into the bunker, when we are protecting ourselves, we fear that judgment, rejection. We get angry if someone is not agreeing with us. It almost becomes like if you're not with me, then you're against me. That energy means that emotions get raised up and it can lead us into angry outbursts or denying the other person altogether their opinion. And what she's calling for is that we remain in our own space and remain empathetic and understanding and calm in the face of that difficult conflict or conversation, which is difficult to do. So, what does that mean in terms of how do we enact that calling out the bullshit and being civil? So, she is saying that the wilderness is difficult and we will feel uncomfortable, but if we notice that somebody is saying something that we don't agree with, rather than nodding along and just saying, well, it's easier just to nod along. We don't need to make them feel uncomfortable. We don't want them to be upset with us or themselves. So we'll just nod along. It's easier to do that. She is suggesting that it's not that we have to call them out in a way of aggressively saying, I disagree, shouting, or doing anything like that. It's leaning into it and being curious and saying, oh, I don't know much about that subject. Can you tell me more? Or I have a different opinion. Do you want to hear it? That you're willing to say that although the majority might go along with what you're saying, I have a different viewpoint about it. And that standing up for yourself means you're being brave, you're showing integrity to yourself, but it might not be comfortable, it might not be easy to do that. So here's what we need to be doing is when we face disagreement, when we face that in our own lives, is showing up with an openness, so open body language, not being closed off, but also empathy, willingness to understand and not judge another person, have generosity around, well, they might not know so much about this, or they might be coming from a place of wanting to fit in, belong, and fearing rejection themselves, or have never really challenged what they think they know, looked around that information. So, how do we do that? How do we stand up in our ground, talking for ourselves? So, we need to be grounded in our values. Why is this important? Knowing it's important that I speak what I think is my truth rather than just going along with somebody else. Check in. Am I being real? Am I just trying to fit in? So noticing the difference between I feel uncomfortable inside because really I'm fitting in rather than being real about what I think, that I don't understand something, that I haven't got enough knowledge about it, that vulnerability. And speaking up not to win, not to win the point, but and not to dominate, but just to connect, to have a conversation, to start opening up and being willing to try to have these conversations. So this takes courage, but it's worth it in terms of opening up and broadening out. So for you this week, and I will do the same, in a conversation, rather than going along with something that you don't understand, you don't agree with, is with this openness, this willing, with empathy, with generosity, to ask for more information. Tell me more about that. Help me understand your viewpoint, why you came to that conclusion, not in an aggressive, confrontational way, but with a purity of heart that I want to know more. I want to understand more to help me, with my opinion too. So we're trying to build connection rather than build bunkers, building that bridge to understanding and remaining empathy. Not always easy, but it's worth trying. It's worth trying. Otherwise, we're moving further into these separate states of being and not understanding the other person. So that's the point. Okay, so I'm Carrie Dubber. Press subscribe if you're enjoying this series that I'm doing, and look out next week for chapter 6. All right, bye for now.